In these kinds of relationship doesn't feel like a choice. You don't really have a choice to be there. You feel compelled to stay because you're trying to manage the pain, theirs and your own. Okay, so if you joined me for the last video on what codependency is, I don't know what I titled it, but you can find it here. We discussed the definition of codependency and we went through some of the traits, the commonly held traits. I shared some of my own experience and backstory with codependency, and honestly, it's kind of stirred up some emotions of where I've been. The ghetto. That's how I feel about codependency. Gosh, the things that I've healed from, and truly, it's like, Lord, the ghetto. It's the ghetto. Not a white refrigerator, not codependency, but okay. Enough, Unique. I'm Unique Bell, and I'm here to help you get free. I'm here to help you experience my secret desires. Is I'm here to help you break out of this jail. I'm here to help you break out of the jail, the prisons, the entrapments of codependency, so that you can experience soul deep love. Let's get into it. Rolling up my sleeves. I'm actually not going to roll up my sleeves. It's not a cute look for this shirt. Okay, so in this video, we're going to get into a question that I received from a follower on TikTok, and they asked, I think I'm in a codependent relationship. What do I do? Pretty simple and to the point. Okay, so I think I'm in this. What do I do? Blank if you need help. And so we're going to be getting into how to recognize and address codependency in your relationship. And so let's review my personal definition of codependency that I shared in the last video. If you want to go on the journey to discovering the definition of codependency, which we take in that video, be sure to just watch that first and then come back here. But this is like the conclusion. The dramatic conclusion. Spoiler alert. So this is my personal definition that I'm using for codependency. Codependency is a problematic relationship orientation where one person feels psychologically trapped by the other, often due to their illness, addiction, and or narcissism. So this is often due to their partner's illness, addiction, and or narcissism. But as we discussed in the last video, codependency is a relationship orientation. So you're not only seeing your intimate relationships through the lens of codependency, typically you're viewing even your work, your life purpose, your hobbies, your friends. It's kind of taking over your life without you realizing it. In this dynamic, one person feels compelled to orient their life around the others, causing a departure from self and a compulsion to endlessly give, caretake, and or monitor the other person's moods, wants, and needs. And so codependents are reactors. We are primarily and ultimately consistently reacting to other people. It's a behavior response that's dependent on another person's actions or lack thereof. And as we discussed in the first video, codependency found its origin in the Alcoholics Anonymous community. It's actually a term that originally was used to describe the flip side of alcoholism, which is the other people involved, the loved ones, right? Your partners, the family members who are dealing with the alcoholic, dealing with and love the alcoholic, right? And want to help, but are getting sucked in to the chaos that results from addiction. Now, the term is widely used to describe the specific orientation to relationships, this compulsion to help, and all the behaviors, often self-destructive, that result But because codependency is describing a particular orientation to relationships and not a set behavior, that means how it shows up for each person varies. It wildly varies. And so that's why in that first video, we went through a long list for you to see the many ways it can be showing up in your life. And for those of us who come from an alcoholic family or have narcissism in our family, so the word codependency has evolved to not only describe being in a relationship with not only an addict, but also a narcissist and even normal people. It's just how you are personally wired to view the world. But if you're someone who grew up in either a narcissistic home or you had addiction in your family, then it's likely that you've always been this way. You've kind of gotten this chip in your brain from birth. And so how you specifically respond, it's going to depend on all the other factors in your life, your religious background, your belief system. Were you dealing with a narcissist or an addict or both, or someone with chronic illness? And so to understand your codependency, you have to understand how it's showing up for you, how you personally react to this other person. But what is the core main through line is that just about every codependent is other focused, right? They are not grounded in themselves. Their priority, they feel a compulsion to prioritize others above self, even at the cost of their own well-being. And so if you're wondering if you're in a codependent relationship, it may be that you're in a relationship with someone who meets those classical requirements, right? The original criteria for being a codependent was that this was a person who was in a relationship with an alcoholic or an addict, another kind of addict, someone who is dependent on a substance, or maybe it's someone who has a chronic illness or is narcissistic. So if you're in a relationship with someone who is any of those three, right, has an addiction, is narcissistic, or has a chronic illness, it's likely that you may be developing some degree of codependency. But it's also common if you're in a relationship with someone who is already codependent. Maybe they come from a family with one of those three in their background, or by some other twist of fate, maybe literally due to a religious belief system, they might have developed codependency elsewhere. And so let's look at some of the signs that you're in a codependent relationship. Number one, you and your partner play giver and taker roles. So rather than having a healthy interdependency where those roles are constantly being interchanged, in your relationship, you find that for the majority of the time, someone is always giving and the other is always taking. Now, I want to put a caveat here, because if you're in a narcissistic relationship, I wouldn't recommend rushing to try to identify who the giver or the taker is. Instead, move on to the next identifiers, because it's very likely that, for lack of a better term, your brain is scrambled. If you've been subjected to years of manipulation, gaslighting, triangulation, like the host of the entire narcissistic playbook, you're not going to be able to see clearly who is playing those roles. Victims of narcissistic abuse are often so gaslit, and they go through so much projection and blame shifting that they actually come to believe that up is down and down is sideways. And I know this from experience. It's very common for narcissists to assert that they're the only ones giving in the relationship. That word only, you'll hear that a lot. Or that you are taking too much from them. And when you buy into this story, when you've been shamed enough and guilt-tripped enough to buy into this story, you may not be able to accurately see that actually you're the one that is being robbed blind. Even if it's not financially, it could be in your energy, in your time, your compassion, your spirit, your sense of vitality, sometimes even your general will to live. Number two, like I said before, if you are in a relationship where your partner is suffering from an addiction or chronic illness, it's very common to develop codependency. This is because these situations create a compulsion within you to help. It feels like you can't not help or protect this person. Next, you tend to feel responsible for your partner. You feel responsible for their feelings, their thoughts, and their overall well-being. Next, boundaries are non-existent or very wobbly. Maybe you say them, but you don't uphold them, and your partner kind of knows that your boundaries, they're not really real. So you might struggle to say no because you feel that compulsion to help, or you may feel that you can't even say no, or you're going to be punished, or there's going to be this big conflict over something as small as like, no, I can't cook dinner tonight, or I can't do this. Something small becomes a big thing, and so you feel like you can't even state a boundary to begin with. Next, you experience a lot of conflict avoidance. Conflict isn't actually resolved in the relationship, and so you may feel that it's better to just keep quiet instead of upsetting them. Alternatively, some codependents may find themselves even provoking their partner on other issues, like things not related to what you care about most, simply because you can't really get your true needs met. And so you have some pent-up anger that you're not addressing. And so you're kind of poking the fire to try to get a rise out of them. Next, you feel a lot of guilt if you take time for yourself to do self-care, to explore your interests, your hobbies, or outside relationships. It may not even be that your partner is explicitly guilting you. They may actually guilt trip in more passive aggressive ways, or this may be an internalized pattern from your past relationships or upbringing that you're bringing into this relationship where you've always kind of felt guilty for taking care of yourself. Next, you are experiencing a lot of self-abandonment. You often forget about your own interest, or maybe you find that you don't believe in yourself anymore because of something your partner said. So in little ways and big ways, you find this trend starting to happen where you're abandoning yourself, your own inner knowing, your own trust in your own discernment more and more in your own decisions. Next, you're never really sure your partner really loves you, or your partner is constantly questioning or testing your love. Another sign is that you find yourself often in a push-pull dynamic. This is really common if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, or if you or your partner has insecure attachment styles. And we will get into attachment theory in another video in about 2 to 3 weeks. So be sure to subscribe below and also hit like if you would like to see that video. Next, you may be feeling a general loss of self and individuality. So you may also be feeling enmeshed in your partner. There's no clear delineation between you and your partner, kind of absorbing into a two-headed baby. Are we going with that? That metaphor, I guess we are. Next, you might be experiencing intense fears of abandonment or controlling behavior from either you or your partner. This can be overtly controlling or even covertly controlling, also present in people pleasing. You may be in a codependent relationship if you're noticing that sex is becoming a tool for manipulation. For example, it's used to create closeness or to people please. For example, you may be having sex to manufacture closeness because you sneakily know that it's going to draw that person closer, especially if they've been, threatening to leave or what have you. And so it becomes a form of manipulation or to people please, right? Because your partner is being very demanding on this topic. Another sign, and this one can go under the radar because we can think it's an us issue and not recognize that it's how we're approaching the relationship or the components of the relationship. And that is feeling unworthy. and feeling a low self-esteem. You may also notice that you struggle to feel happy on your own. You need something outside of yourself in order to feel happy, or you may delay feeling happy until you feel everyone else is taken care of. And so when we're considering are we or are we not in a codependent relationship, what it comes down to at the end of the day is, am I codependent or not? Like I said, codependency is a reaction to another person's behavior. It's a pattern that can develop in reaction in response to experiencing something abnormal, like, addiction in your family, or chronic illness, or narcissism, or a mental disorder that puts you in the position of being the giver, right? But at the end of the day, you are the person that is reacting. And so let's look at some of those reactions that you could be having and actually showing you that you are, in fact, a codependent. One, you find yourself fixing or rescuing others, and you often disguise this in the package of empathy, being empathetic, caretaking, or giving. I'm just a giver. You may find yourself lying to cover up your partner's shortcomings or their misbehavior, or you may take the blame for their behavior or make excuses to other people about it. Are you noticing that you're tolerating the intolerable? So things that you previously said, I would never put up with that. Things like disrespect, lying, abuse, violence, and yet you find yourself putting up with it, excusing it away. Codependents always have a reason. We always have a reason, right? And it's often masked in compassion and our values, so we often can't see what's happening. Do you find that you neglect your own needs? You so prioritize everyone else's needs that you often put yourself on the back burner. You don't make time for yourself, or you cancel those important plans that you have. Maybe you have a dream, right, of writing or working on something, and you put it off because someone else, they need you. They just need you. And so you find yourself constantly going to the call and the every beck and call of someone else. This is another subtle one that we can internalize so much and not catch, but you may notice that you're starting to feel empty. You have a loss of purpose, a loss of direction in your life. You can't stir up those feelings anymore. Are you noticing that you're not able to relax or feel at ease unless your partner is feeling emotionally okay? Like you can't have nice things unless they, have their desires and they are taken care of. In particularly abusive relationships, this can go to a point where we really become hypervigilant as well. So we're constantly scanning the environment, not just because we think it's a good thing to do, right? Or I want to help, I wanted this. We begin to scan because it's not safe until the partner is satisfied. If they're not satisfied, then you're going to have someone raging at you, or you're going to go through passive aggression, all this mental warfare, right? And so you scan the environment to make sure things are in their proper order, things are prepared and ready for that person, so that you don't have to deal with the emotional backlash. This is also another subtle one that you may not even recognize as a trait of codependency, but you may find that you idolize your partner or you put them on a pedestal. Do you find that you are taking on too much responsibility in the relationship? For example, you're the one who does a lot of the child rearing, or you do a lot of the cleaning or the organizing of dates, or you do a lot of the emotional labor in the relationship, or you're covering most of the cost, even if you're not making significantly more money than your partner. Do you find yourself hiding your own needs and pretending to be okay out of fear of conflict, abandonment, shaming, bullying, or rage? So even though the behaviors and the actual patterns that show up in codependency greatly vary from person to person, you know your relationship is codependent if there is this imbalance of giving and taking. One person's needs and desires and their dreams always seem to matter more than the others. And you feel compelled, this compulsion to always acquiesce and make them the center of your life. And if you are someone who has that background of addiction or chronic illness or narcissism in your family, you may be someone who has experienced codependency all your life. And if that's the case, it's quite difficult to identify it. What feels like your thoughts are actually simply your reactions to other people. You don't yet know how to fully think and feel for yourself. I mean, it's truly mind trippy once you start to catch it, once you start to identify it. It's like going from intense fog to 100% visibility. But even if things are still foggy and you still can't tell just how codependent you are or how it's affecting you, you can still feel it. You can feel it in that simmering anger you have that you don't let yourself feel because you feel guilty and shameful for even being angry at this person. You can feel it in this sinking belief that things just don't work out for you. And I think most profoundly, you can feel it in that gaping hole inside of you, the one that feels like falling into an abyss. Anytime you think about leaving or them leaving, in these kinds of relationship doesn't feel like a choice. You don't really have a choice to be there. You feel compelled to stay because you're trying to manage the pain, theirs and your own. And so I think I'm in a codependent relationship. What do I do? Here's my response. So with codependency recovery, there's 2 layers to address. There's the original wound and all those behaviors and traits and emotions that manifest from that wound. In this video and the last, we've talked a lot about the latter, but we haven't really addressed that original wound. A common advice given to codependents is that they just need to set healthy boundaries. But boundaries will likely feel very surface level, or like you have to constantly enforce them until you address that thing inside that's calling you, that's pulling you, that's creating that compulsion to rescue the other person from their discomfort. And what I said to our friend on TikTok, which is what I'll say to you, is the illusion or the story that codependents are often living in is that I'm trying to please them, I'm trying to help them, I'm trying to make them comfortable, I'm trying to rescue them. But the reality is that we're actually trying to rescue ourselves. We find that position of not being pleasing, of other people not being pleased with us, of them being upset with us, of them thinking that we're selfish, of them criticizing us. We find that so painful and uncomfortable that we are doing what we can to make sure that we don't have to experience it. You are trying to rescue yourself from pain and discomfort. This compulsion becomes so strong that it can actually start to feel physically painful to result the patterning. Now, it's important to note the reason why we are so hardwired, right? Those of us who have intense, right? It's not just moderate codependency, it's quite intense. The compulsion to help, to please is so strong. Sometimes this comes from a genuine need for safety. If you're dealing with violent or narcissistic parents or partners, it's a way to protect yourself. And psychologically, even in the milder cases, it's also a way to protect yourself. But over time, this form of protection becomes self-destructive. We often know we need to recover because it is ruining our own lives. And so the first step in recovery, learning to work on you, for you, and not to save your relationship or even your partner. You're doing this for you. What I help with is helping you to heal that original wound, that part of you that finds it so very painful to set boundaries, to disappoint others, to not step up to the rescue. I help you create a felt sense of safety and belonging from inside, and a felt sense of love that comes from the inside. And if you're not in a relationship with a narcissist or abusive person, doing this work means that you then become a rock, a steady, secure rock for your partner. You get to demonstrate that your boundaries don't mean that you don't love them. If your partner has an insecure attachment style, you get to show them that your boundaries are not you distancing yourself from them. It doesn't mean that you don't love them. It's actually a way to make sure that the relationship stays loving and healthy. And so while as a codependent, our boundaries are reactive, they're often got a lot of fear wrapped up in them. And sometimes that is needed. So that's not necessarily a bad thing all the time, but as you're in that recovery stage and your relationship has the foundations, good enough foundations for this to become a healthy and secure relationship, you don't need to speak them or demonstrate them with anger. You actually feel very sovereign in your being, and that shift in your nervous system, you no longer need to wait until all the anger and frustration builds up and you speak your boundary in anger. You actually get to be so sovereign, and your partner feels this, and your nervous system can feel that you're coming from a place of calm. You're coming from a place of love. You're not actually pushing them away. You're just showing up for your own needs. And so when you remain steady and grounded, you can actually help your partner to regulate themselves as well. That is what we call nervous system coherence. It's very similar to how regulated parents are able to help their children regulate simply by keeping control of their own nervous system. They're able to stay calm, loving, and accessible, and that helps their child to not freak out. And so your partner will no longer associate your needs and your boundaries with pain, loss, anger, fear, abandonment, all the things that maybe they've learned in their own upbringing can come from distance or space. Boundaries will no longer feel like cruelty. They kind of start to feel like love. And so that's a typical journey of going from codependent in your relationship to interdependent, being able to meet each other's needs and acknowledge each other's needs. But ultimately, this all depends on what you are specifically dealing with. Like I said, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, that's a whole other, you're dealing with a whole other thing, and you're going to need time to understand what is actually happening in the relationship, the patterns of abuse, and you're going to need time to break any kind of cognitive dissonance that's formed or brainwashing from the victim blaming. And so it's going to take a different route if that's your situation. If you're in a more abusive dynamic, you're going to have to really get the support you need for that situation. There likely is not enough safety in that relationship for you to fully recover and remain in the relationship. But that is a personal choice each person who is in that experience must make. There's no shame. Maybe you're co-parenting because you absolutely have to, or you're dealing with some other extenuating circumstance that's unique to you, and you just know that this is the best choice for me right now. In those situations, you're likely going to have to learn coping mechanisms to withstand the abuse, and alongside your codependency recovery. And even then, you'll likely only fully be able to act from your recovered place with the other relationships in your life and not with a narcissistic or abusive partner. Healing is a journey. Like I said, there's no right or wrong if you decide to stay or maybe stay for a period and leave later. But if you want support in parsing out what am I dealing with, how do I get back to my own locus of control and center of wisdom so that I can make the best choice for me, that's why I'm here. So if you like to work with me one-on-one, I do have some private coaching spots available. You can learn more at uniquebelle.com/coaching. But I hope this was helpful. It is a lot to unpack and come to terms with. You may need to rewatch this video a couple times, as well as watch the first one. And this is actually a little series that I'm doing. So I've got some more videos coming up next week on how to recover and some of the tools that have worked the best for me. If you have a moment, I would really appreciate if you leave a thumbs up on this video and maybe even drop in the comments. What are you taking away from this? Did you have a personal aha moment? I know for me in my recovery, the best realization was knowing that this was something I needed to heal. And even though it's a dynamic between two or more people or multiple people in your life, I had the power to heal this for myself. And me changing means those relationships will change or they'll fall away if they need to. But I wasn't truly trapped, even though I felt like I was. I wasn't. I actually had the power all along. And so do you. So comment below, what are you taking away? What was eye-opening, or what are some tools and resources that are helping you? Go ahead and share with our community. Thank you for being here. Again, I'm Unique Belle. I'm a certified intimacy coach. I'm here to help you break free. I'm here to help you experience soul deep love. If you'd like to learn more about my offerings, go ahead and check out my website, uniquebelle.com. All the links to everything mentioned will be below. And like I said, I'll be back in just a few days with another video. So subscribe, like, and I'll see you there. Okay, so I think I'm in this. What do I do? Blink if you need help.